Hello guys, welcome to CrownSmart. In this video we want to show that the following functions are onto functions. We want to check if the following functions are onto functions. So we're not just going to do much solving, we're just going to recall from our last video that first of all, for a function to be an onto function, the codomain must be equal to the range. Okay, now let's illustrate this. Let's say this is a function mapping the domain to the codomain. Now we have the function containing x2, x1, this codomain containing f of x1 and f of x2. Now observe that the codomain is the set of f of x1, f of x2, and the range here is f of x1 and f of x2. Okay, because this f of x1 and f of x2 are being assigned to the corresponding x1 and x2. Okay, so you see that the codomain is the same thing as the range. So therefore, this function is said to be what? Onto. Now we want to check if the following functions are onto. Now from our previous video, we know that the range for this function, because f is mapping r to r, so the range for this function from our previous video is all real numbers. So therefore, since the range of this function is equal to the codomain, therefore this function is what? An onto function. Okay, now we move over to this one. Now we want to check if this function is onto. From our previous video, this one the range for this function is minus 0.25 to what? Infinity, which is not all real numbers. It's not the same as the range and the codomain. So therefore this is not what? An onto function. Okay, also this is also not an onto function because the range from our previous video is from 0 to what? Infinity, which is not all real numbers, because the function is mapping a real number to a real number from the domain to the real number to the codomain, and the codomain is all real number, whereas the range is not all real number. Supposing I decide to change this function f mapping from r to maybe this minus 0.25 to infinity, that is when I can say that this function is what? An onto function, if f is defined as this. Okay, and if I decide to do the same thing, f mapping from r to what? 0 to infinity for this particular function where your f is defined as this, then we can say that this function is onto. But from the question, these functions are what? Are not onto. Okay, so now the next one now is the lean part. Now from our previous video, our range is minus infinity to infinity. Since the range is all real number and our codomain is all real number, therefore this function is what? An onto function. Now moving to the next question, our codomain is all real number, but the range from our previous video is 0 to what? Infinity. So since this is not all real number, since the range here is not the same as this, the codomain, then this function is not what? An onto function. Now let's assume, supposing I make f of this mapping from 1 to infinity to 0 to infinity, and I define this my f to be this question. Now f of x equal to square root of minus x minus 1. Therefore I can now say that this function is an onto function if f is mapping this to this. Okay, but from the question, f is mapping this to this, so this cannot be what? An onto what? Function. Thank you very much. Please do not forget to subscribe to this video. Thank you very much. In our next video, we'll be discussing on a bijective function.